welcome. I'm delighted to introduce a very distinguished guest today, Michael Martens. Mr. Martens has been a correspondent for the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung for the last 20 years. I believe one of the best newspapers in Europe. And you've been based in Vienna for the last few years as a correspondent for mostly the countries of Western Balkans, but you also lived in Russia, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, Turkey,
Greece, Serbia.
And I want to ask you about all these places. I want to talk to you about EU, Russia, EU, Ukraine, about the future of the European Union. But I would like to start with the countries of the Western Balkans. And you've been working for the FAZ for more than 20 years, and it was exactly 20 years ago where the European Union made a firm commitment towards the countries of Western Balkans, saying that the future of Western Balkans is in Europe. Not much happened since then. Why?
Well, something has happened, but not much has happened for the last, let's say, 10 years. After the 2003 summit, something did happen. The Big Bang of 2004, the enlargement, where, among other countries, your country joined the European Union, so 10 countries joined at the time. Then we had another smaller enlargement round in 2007 when Bulgaria and Romania joined. And then we had 2013 in 1st of June or 1st of July, I forgot the exact date, Croatia joining. Yes. And that's basically it. Ever since the process went into, let's say, hibernation, even though no one officially admitted it. And I could illustrate that, or try to illustrate that, with some figures, which I think are rather telling. So, for example, Slovakia and I think also Lithuania, so the Baltic states, negotiated for the European Union membership 34 months, from the beginning to the end. That's not so much. Poland, bigger country of course, negotiated 56 months. And the record holder so far is also the last member ever to join. Croatia negotiated 68 months, so 5.5 years. Yes. It's a lot, but it's still more or less something that you can plan with. Now this was 2013. Now let's have a look at the countries, the 6 countries of the Western Balkans who are negotiating now. The oldest negotiator is Montenegro. They started in 2012. And in all these years, ever since, more than 11 years, more,
yes.
They only provisionally closed 3 chapters of the enlargement process.
That is the so-called acquis communautaire, right? Every country that wants to become a full member has to accept, apply, absorb a vast body of EU legislation.
There are by now like 35, 34 chapters for each country, and Montenegro, as an example, but it gets worse with the other countries. Montenegro is the leader, so to speak. It has managed to close 3 chapters provisionally within the scope of the last 11 years. Now, if you take this speed, if we want to call it speed at all, to the future, this would mean mathematically, first of all, Montenegro needed more time to close 1 chapter than other countries for the entire negotiation process. Yes. So if you look at the future, if the current speed, again, if we want to call this speed at all, the current pace is being kept up, then Montenegro mathematically can join in the year 2127. You will be dead, I will be dead, our kids will be dead, our grandchildren might still be alive if they adhere to a healthy lifestyle.
I'm not going to be dead. My son is working on that already.
Okay. Okay, good luck to you.
Put that aside.
If you find something out, then let me know. I'd like to see Montenegro joining.
Back to Montenegro and Serbia, because Jean-Claude Juncker, who was then the president of the European Commission.
When?
In 2017, he said that Serbia and Montenegro should be able to join, should be in the position to join in 2025. That's not going to happen, is it?
No, I think no one is going to join anytime. I mean, basically, if you look at the speeches of Emmanuel Macron, there's something that many people overlook, but it shouldn't be overlooked. Macron has said on a couple of occasions, he has given speeches in the European Parliament, even in Belgrade when he was visiting, and on other occasions, he has said, the European Union as it is now, with 27 or then 28 members, is already not functioning well. It's very tough to get to decisions because of certain decisions can only be taken unanimously. And he says, and he has said this a couple of times, you can easily find the speeches in the internet. Now, the European Union works already with difficulties with 25 members. How is it going to work with 30, 32 or 35 members? I don't even want to imagine it. Basically, he says, we cannot accept new members as long as there is the veto rights on certain decisions. Some people say, well, presidents come and go, Macron will be gone one day. Of course, he will be gone one day, but I doubt that the point of view of Paris and of the president, whoever it might be in the future, I mean, if it's Le Pen, we don't have to talk about European Union anymore at all anyway, but even if it is a reasonable politician, he or she would still probably argue that this veto right we cannot take in new members with veto rights because it becomes ungovernable. It's not even important whether you and I share the view. This is the view of a very important member country. And basically, I think it's also the German view. Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor, has given a couple of interviews where he says, I'm very much for enlargement, but we need to change the unanimity principle before.
In fact, I should have said that I'm talking to you in Prague, and the Bundeskanzler, the Chancellor, the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, gave a major speech on the future of Europe in Prague at Charles University, making precisely the point, right?
Exactly.
That you just said.
Now think this through. The German Chancellor says, we are very much for enlargement of the Western Balkans, plus now also Ukraine and Moldova. Just one tiny reform has to be done before we have to get rid of or to diminish or to reform the principle of unanimity voting. Now, if you think this through, Scholz, I think, knows very well this is not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Poland is not going to agree with it. Many countries are not. And I even think it wouldn't be a good idea, because I think the veto right in certain decisions, let's not forget, many decisions in the European Union can be taken with majority.
Yes, so we are talking about common foreign security policy.
Exactly,
that is the point of contention.
Exactly. And we do have problems with it. Now look at the sanctions against Russia and what Orban is doing and so on.
The Hungarian
Hungarian Prime Minister, exactly. But I do think this veto right is something like a safety belt or a safety valve for the functioning of the European Union, especially for the smaller countries. Yes. It's easy to say when you're France or Germany, we need just majority opinions, decisions. It's not so easy. And if you think it through, think of a European Union without this veto right, without this possibility to safeguard national interests as you define them in country X, Y, Z. I think that could actually be a ticking time bomb on the fundaments of the European Union if this is taken away. But that is a separate discussion. We don't even have to argue what we both, even though I think we are close on that, what we think about it. The problem is, or the thing is, that it's not going to happen. You need unanimity to take away the unanimity principle of voting, and we will not have this. Now, if you come back to Scholz, who says, let's reform this, and then we are for enlargement, basically, in my opinion, he also says, I'm against enlargement.
Yes.
Because being an intelligent, smart political mind, he knows it's not going to happen. So if you say, I'm for it, if something impossible happens, basically you're saying, I'm not for it.
Yes. Can I now go even further back? We discussed the process of enlargement towards Western Balkans that kind of was kick-started in 2003 through Thessaloniki summit. Going back to the early 1990s, 30 years ago, Germany played an important role in relation to Yugoslavia and what then became the countries of former Yugoslavia. Do you think it was a mistake for the German government to have recognized Croatia and
don't get me
Slovenia?
started on this. I'm going to lecture you for an hour. You just interrupt me.
I don't want you to talk for an hour.
No, I won't.
You have 3 minutes for it so that we can move to more current
I think it was
issues.
definitely not. This is a myth and a legend, which is partly nourished by Putin, by Serbian nationalists, by European left-wing or Western left-wing, Noam Chomsky and those people. Germany destroyed Yugoslavia by the so-called premature recognition of Slovenia and Croatia. This is wrong for so many reasons. The most important is chronology. It's not even a question of opinion. Yes. By the time the European Union, by the way, the European community recognized Slovenia and Croatia, not Germany alone. Yes. By the time this happened, by the time the decision was taken in December 17th, 1991, Yugoslavia didn't exist anymore. Yes. Vukovar was a city in Croatia, was in ruins, destroyed by the Yugoslav army and paramilitary forces. Yes. Dubrovnik had been shelled. Massacres had been committed. The Yugoslav army had tried to subdue, to conquer, to conquest Slovenia, but they failed. So it's just, if you look at what happened first and what happened then, is Yugoslavia was destroying itself, and then Germany recognized, basically saying what today is mostly accepted. You have very few people still adhering to the view that it was Germany's fault.
You traveled to the region when the Russian full-blown invasion of Ukraine occurred. You visited Odessa shortly after the invasion. But again, I still want to make comparisons, right? So are there any lessons for the EU as a whole, for Germany, to be taken from the wars in Yugoslavia, the disintegration of Yugoslavia, and the relative impotence of Europe in relation to that? Or perhaps more positive lessons that can be drawn from the story of EU enlargement? You mentioned that the Big Bang enlargement happened in 2004, and my homeland, the Czech Republic and Slovakia, were accepted as full members alongside eight other countries. 8 out of 10 were from the former Communist bloc. So are there any lessons for Western Europe, for the EU, that can be drawn, right? Like in the 90s, basically the common foreign security policy was in its beginning, and Europe proved largely impotent in relation to Milosevic. It was the United States that had to pacify the region, if you want. Are we in a very similar position now, that Ukraine needs the help of the West, but the key actor there again is the United States?
Absolutely. Right? The European Union, or European Community as it was called, is until the beginning of 99, or mid of 99, was not capable of militarily intervening then, and it's basically not capable now. Everything that happened on the Balkans is a Pax Americana. Yes. It was the Americans as NATO lead nation that actually intervened, and only once they intervened, and also we must say once then Great Britain and France joined, because they didn't play such a positive role in the Balkans in the early 90s, not at all. There's an interesting book called Unfinest Hour about what Britain did, or rather did not do, during the destruction of Yugoslavia, especially in Bosnia.
Which is an allusion, of course, that Britain's finest hour was during the Second World War, right?
Well, should we really get into this?
No,
I mean,
no.
But definitely it was not a fine hour for Great Britain foreign policy in the
But
early
not
90s.
a fine hour for Germany, for major Western...
That's true.
And for the European community, as you said. I mean, the European community became the European Union through the Treaty of Maastricht, right?
In 91.
91.
I mean, you said it yourself. The European foreign and security policy was just in the beginning stages. So Europe didn't have any instruments. It was it was an economic giant, but it was a military dwarf. Today, I would say it is, well, still an economic giant, even though a shrinking giant, so to speak, but still a giant. Now, for you living in Hong Kong, that word giant might look a little funny, but it's still, economically it does mean something. But militarily, we are still not anywhere near to be able to, let's say, put order into our own house without the help of the Americans, unfortunately. If there's one positive aspect as far as Germany is concerned about this horrible war in Ukraine, is that Germany has matured a little bit in the way it debates and discusses foreign and security policy.
So Germany discovered that it needs a strategy towards the EU, towards the outside world, and that is the gist of the Zeitenwende, right?
Well, Germany discovered that basically military is an element of foreign policy, which until a year ago, 2 years ago, many people would have said, "Oh no, we are beyond that. We are, it's all about negotiations. It's all about
trade." And there is this famous policy that was applied towards East Germany, towards the Soviet Union, later towards Russia, Wandel durch Handel, that is. Transformation through trade, or there's another phrase like that, Annäherung, right? What is it again? Well, Handel durch Handel captures that.
I'm not saying that we should now forget about all the dogmas of the past. I don't think Wandel durch Handel is like completely obsolete. There is some truth in it. But the problem of the German foreign policy debate, I mean, you lived in Germany. I think it used to be very immature. Immature in the sense that we thought you could define the world through values and not through interests. I'm not saying values are not important. I'm not a so-called neo-realist or realpolitiker who says, values are just crap, we just need to look for our interests. No. I think values and interest go together, and interest must be bolstered by hard military power. And we have more or less finally, slowly, I think, understood this. There is a change. It's hard, it's difficult, but look, at the beginning of the war, it's even embarrassing, but it's true. Germany said, oh, we cannot help, and then the then German foreign defense minister, total disaster, but let's not get into that, said, oh, we can deliver 500 helmets. You know, this was the German contribution to the defense of Ukraine against Russian fascism. Yes. I mean, this is, if this is not ridiculous, I was ashamed then to be from that country. But now things have changed. Tanks are being delivered. Patriot systems are being delivered. And I hope more, because basically, I mean, it sounds a little kitschy, but it's true. Ukraine defends us. Yes.
And now I do want to move to the current situation and discuss both Germany's position towards Ukraine and Russia and the EU's position towards Germany towards Ukraine and Russia. And so, on the one hand, there was a great show of unity early on in terms of sanctions or even support by delivery of military equipment, etc. But on the other hand, my impression is even the United States to some extent is guilty of that Ukraine gets enough to defend itself, but not enough to repel the aggressor, right? To expel.
Too much to die, too little to live.
I mean, yes, and then it's going to be a forever war. And then my impression is that the EU has consistently overpromised and underdelivered.
I mean, what happened in the Balkans? In the Balkans, mainly, a certain cynicism has developed as far as the European Union is concerned with the young generation. In Serbia by now, which is also partly due to President Vucic's propaganda machine, majority of people are against joining the European Union. Of course.
And Vucic is a complicated figure because he is fairly pro-Putin, he is fairly pro-Chinese, right?
He tries to steer, sometimes I say it's the Serbian dog wagging the Yugoslav tail. He tries to copy the Tito model. Just in this world, it's not working that way anymore, at least in the long run. No, but the problem is, again, look at the time scale. Montenegro, judging by today, would join 2,127, like in nowhere, no man's time, no man's land. Of course, people...
And now today, Ursula von der Leyen says, Ukraine is Europe. Charles Michel, the president of the European Council, says, we are all Ukrainians. I should have said Ursula von der Leyen is the president of the European Commission. And I feel, well, what does it mean? Does it mean that Ukraine will become a full member in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years?
I don't see that happening for the precise reasons that I have mentioned before. There are certain member states, maybe with good reasons, that say we cannot take in full-fledged members who have a veto right because the European Union becomes ungovernable. Don't forget that the European Union also had the policy we do not take in countries with an open military conflict.
Yes.
Cyprus is the exception, divided since 1974, but Cyprus was taken in only as a result of the blackmail of Greece, because Greece, I think at the European Summit in Helsinki in 1999, but I would have to double check that, said we are going to block the entire Eastern enlargement if Cyprus is not taken in, and this is how we ended up with having Cyprus as a member. I think there is a potential way out of the dilemma, though. The idea is, okay.
So you have a vision for the future of Europe.
It's not only
that
my...
would include Ukraine, that would include the countries of Western Balkans.
Yes, it's not my vision or my idea. I just find it convincing, which is why I argue for it, or why I describe it, so that many people can talk about it. It's not obviously up to me to decide about it. If we say, okay, full-fledged membership, for the reason we have discussed, is simply not possible in the foreseeable future, and we must do politics for the foreseeable future, for our kids, for the generation to come, and maybe a little bit for us as well. If this is not possible, and it's not possible, then what else can we do? Should we just say, nothing is going to happen? No, we can't do. We must act, because if we don't act, others will act.
Yes. Even China,
Turkey, whatever, especially in the Balkans. Exactly. Russia. Well, Russia has maybe kicked itself out of the picture a little bit, but it's still there. So what can we do? There is the idea of offering the countries of the Western Balkans, plus Moldova, plus Ukraine, membership in the single market, offering them what Norway has. I would say, well, if it's good for Norway, maybe it shouldn't be too bad for North Macedonia or Bosnia-Herzegovina or Kosovo. Norway is member of the single market, but not of the political European Union. The advantage is the fears of President Macron and others that we cannot have new veto.
And the Prime Minister Scholz.
And Chancellor Scholz, we cannot have new members who have veto rights, is taken away by this, because in the single market you are not part of the political process. You have a membership à la carte, I would say. So this problem is out of the way, no veto rights. But still, for the people, and this is what we are doing, what people are doing, should be doing politics for the everyday, for the normal person in Skopje, in Macedonia, in Sarajevo, in Bosnia, in Belgrade, wherever, it is in daily life as if he or she is citizen of a European Union country, because you can live and work wherever you like. No one can forbid you. You can go to Denmark, you can go to France, you can go to Spain, to Germany. You are economically a subject of the European Union with all rights that this entails. The only thing you do not have, but let's face it, how many people care for that, is you cannot vote in the elections for European Parliament. Your country doesn't have an own commissioner, and thus it doesn't have a veto right in the European Union. But besides, you have everything, and maybe you will not have to go to the European Union anymore, because if your country flourishes, why would you leave?
Yes. And that could be implemented much faster than a full-fledged
there's still no guarantee. It can still become object of blockades, unfortunately, but it's a much more realistic process, because the core argument of those people who are skeptical, saying we can just not take in more more members who have the veto right, is taken out. And there are still problems. I mean, look what they've done to North Macedonia. That's an interesting case. Yes. North Macedonia in 2018 did more than any other country in the history of North Macedonia.
Including changing its very name.
That's what I mean. They had a referendum because Greece, for reasons that are maybe too complicated now to discuss, people can Google it, Greece was blocking Macedonia when it was still called Macedonia, saying this is an ancient Greek name, you cannot have this name, this is Greek. And this was going on for 15 years, even more, basically with the moment that Macedonia declared independence in 1991. Greece was blocking everything, under pressure from the European Union, from George Bush at the time, who wanted to take them into NATO. No, any Greek government said, no way, you have first to change your name. Yeah. Now then, it did happen in 2018. The government of Alexis Tsipras and Nikos Koutsias in Greece, and the government of Zoran Zaev and Nikola Dimitrov in Skopje made an historic agreement. The name was changed, not the identity. The Macedonians, also by the Greek Treaty of Perespa, could still call themselves Macedonian, because you cannot change your identity.
Of course.
But they did change the name from Macedonia to North Macedonia. The Greeks said, okay, now it's clear this is not the historical terminus, and
And yet North Macedonia is still not about to join.
Exactly. So everyone said, I mean, Angela Merkel went to Skopje to tell them, vote for the name change. She didn't specifically promised then you will be member in the European Union, but she was insinuating it very clear. Ursula von der Leyen came also to Skopje to promise the same. She was then Minister of Defense of Germany, not Commission President. I think Mike Pompeo also came. So everyone came and said, vote for the change because that's important. What happened? It's not true that North Macedonia didn't get anything. They did get NATO membership, which in these times is nothing. But as soon as the Greek veto was lifted, voila, the Bulgarians came and said, no, you cannot, because you must first admit that your identity is basically Bulgarian, that your language has Bulgarian origins, and so on. Which is, this is really absurd. It's like a nationalistic interpretation of history from the 19th century, but unfortunately this is where we are. So I can understand very well them. And now what we are facing is, Bulgarians say, first you have to change your constitution and to include the Bulgarian minority, in brackets, these are 3,500 people.
3,500 people. Out of 10 million?
No, 2 million.
I mean the population of Bulgaria.
Yeah, Bulgaria is 8 million, but
2 million.
Macedonia is 2 million.
Macedonia, that's right.
And so 3,500, and you have the Bulgarians say only if you change your constitution and include this tiny minority.
2% basically.
3,500 people. That's, I would say that's less. Huh?
Yeah.
If you include them into the constitution, then we lift our block, not for becoming member, we lift our blockade for beginning of negotiations, to which the opposition in Skopje, I think rightly says, listen, we're going to do this, and then tomorrow you come around the corner with another veto. We are not going to accept this. There is one idea, and then I'll finish on that issue, but I think that's an interesting, it's a little bit nitty-gritty detail, but it's interesting because European Union is about details.
Yes.
The Macedonian opposition party, Vimro, has made a suggestion from what I have heard. I'm going to Skopje now to understand more about it, that I find interesting. They said, I mean, in order to change the constitution, they needed 2/3 majority, so it depends on the opposition, on Vimro. Are they going to go along or not? Yes. Basically, they're against. But they said there's one, under one condition, we might even vote for this change, for including Bulgarians into the constitution of, into the preamble of the Macedonian constitution. We vote for the change. We say, yes, Bulgarians will be included as founding people into our constitution, but the change comes into effect only on the day when we become members of the European Union. I find that's a smart idea, but let's see how it goes.
Thank you so much. The very last question, a bit more personal. You have traveled a lot through the Western Balkans.
Yeah.
You lived in places, as I said at the beginning, in Russia, in Ukraine. And we talk about identity.
Yeah.
Tell me about your identity. How do you feel? Are you German?
Well, I can just give you the standard answer. I think we all have many identities. You have your husband, a son, you're a brother, you're a father, you are, then you have your national identity. Yes, I am German, but within Germany, when I'm in Bavaria, I very much feel like I'm Northern German. I'm from Hamburg. And when you go to Hamburg, you could also say, to which soccer club do you do you adhere, so to speak? But and then again, when I travel to Asia, I very much feel that I'm European. Yes. So it's an identity that very much depends on the moment and the geographic location of where you ask me. My basic answer would be, I think the more you travel, the less nationalistic you would become. Maybe you could become more patriotic because you also see the positive signs of your own country. But the nationalists that I usually have met are people who rarely have left their own country.
Herr Michael Martens, vielen Dank.
Bitte, bitte.
Das war wunderbar. Thank you very much.
Das freut mich, wenn es so war. Danke Ihnen.
Thank you.